Hello and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches, a program that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Amarachi Ubani, standing in for your regular host, Teniola Oyetayo. On the program this week, around 2 million Muslims converge in Saudi Arabia for annual Hajj pilgrimage as millions celebrate Eid-Al-Adha around the world. Plus, amid a 10-week conflict, Sudanese mark Eid, praying for peace. Each year, Muslims around the world gather in Saudi Arabia to perform the Hajj, the sacred pilgrimage and the fifth pillar of Islam. This year has seen the largest pilgrimage since 2019, after which the Hajj was dramatically curbed due to coronavirus restrictions that limited the gathering to just a few thousand people.
With temperatures reaching 48 degrees Celsius, pilgrims splash their faces with water and cool down in the water sprays that line the pathways of the Grand Mosque in Mecca. Many pilgrims wrapped in white robes also carried umbrellas to protect themselves against the burning sun on Tuesday as they marked Arafah, Hajj's most important day.
The weather is very hot, but the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is providing air conditioners, cooling systems and water and everything, so we are okay.
Worshippers could be seen walking along the streets of Arafat and climbing the rocky Mount of Mercy at sunrise, where Prophet Muhammad is believed to have delivered his final sermon 14 centuries ago.
درجة الحرارة معروفة على مستوى مكة لأن هي طبعا من زمان وهي معروفة إن هي كسهول.
For me, Hajj is a big dream. I have tried many times before to come, but thanks be to God, we have been blessed this year. It is a big and beautiful feeling. I am extremely happy in this trip. May God accept our prayers. This year, I did what I said I would do last Hajj, and I was able to come here to this large gathering. I learned my lesson from the last Hajj, and I came early. I did not imagine that I would be able to climb up Mount Mercy. I feel so happy. I cannot express my feelings with words.
Muslim pilgrims also attended the prayer at Al-Nimra Mosque in Mecca before moving to Muzdalifah Plain, where they gathered pebbles to throw at stone columns symbolizing the devil. The ritual stoning marks the first day of Eid-Al-Adha, or the Feast of Sacrifice, celebrated by Muslims across the globe. The Hajj, a once-in-a-lifetime duty for every able-bodied Muslim who can afford it, is considered the world's biggest religious gathering. Saudi Arabia prepared to host some 2.6 million pilgrims for the 2023 Hajj season after removing all COVID-19 restrictions for the first time since 2019.
For Sudanese pilgrims who made it to Mecca for Hajj, their prayers were focused on peace in the country. More than 10 weeks of fighting between the Sudanese army and the Rapid Support Forces paramilitary units has created a huge humanitarian crisis in Sudan. With thousands having fled the country, many families are celebrating the holiday far apart.
As war rages in Sudan, people in the eastern coastal city of Port Sudan try to have a sense of normalcy ahead of the Eid celebrations. In a livestock market, people were seen checking available animals to purchase, despite prices being significantly higher than the previous years.
I work to make a living for my children, and with the situation, it's tough. But we thank God for people who can afford to share.
Sudanese people deserve better than the current situation. They truly deserve better. The people have been suffering for long, and they still have strong faith in God. That is why you see them still celebrating Eid.
The war has caused a major humanitarian crisis, uprooting more than 2.5 million people, about 600,000 of whom have crossed into neighboring countries, meaning some families spent the Muslim holiday this week far away from their relatives. Meanwhile, as heavy clashes once again besieged the Sudanese capital Khartoum on Sunday, Sudanese pilgrims in Saudi Arabia's Mecca for the annual Hajj ritual focused their prayers on peace in the country.
Here we are praying, and we ask all Muslims to take this opportunity to pray for stability and safety in the Muslim world, and to pray for their brothers in Sudan, that the country stabilizes and people live in safety and security.
The fighting between the army and paramilitary rapid support forces in Sudan has killed at least 1,000 people, an underestimate according to medics. A record 25 million people, more than half the country's population, are in need of aid and protection, according to the United Nations, which says it has received only a fraction of the necessary funding.
Well, thousands of people continue to pour into neighboring Chad, fleeing conflict and violence in Sudan's West Darfur state. More than 100,000 people have fled across the border to Chad since conflict broke out in Sudan in April. United Nations warns the number could double over the next 3 months.
Hawaya Ibrahim and her family were sleeping at their home in Tendalti in Sudan's western Darfur region when armed men entered the house. Her husband was shot and her son hit by a stray bullet. Her husband later died from his wounds.
It is fighting that brought me here. The militia entered my house. They've killed my husband and wounded my son. I was also tortured. So I fled and came to Chad. I fled at 11 p.m. with my injured child. I carried him on my back. We didn't even have anything for transport. I had to leave my other children behind. Thankfully, other people brought them here.
The mother of 4 fled on foot towards the border with Chad, carrying her injured son on her back. Hawaya and her children are among over 90,000 Sudanese refugees who have fled to neighboring Chad since fighting between rival military factions started in Khartoum and spread in parts of the country.
They have fled not only because of the war in Khartoum, but because also of inter-community crisis within the community in Tendalti.
Western Darfur has been particularly affected by the conflict, which has reignited existing ethnic and intercommunal tensions. Heavy civilian casualties have been reported, as well as looting and burning of public and humanitarian facilities, including camps for internally displaced people.
Fear of being attacked because of the war forced them to flee, and then all of them are here.
Most new arrivals are women and children forced to stay out in the open or sleep in makeshift structures. Even before the current influx, Chad was hosting over 1 million forcibly displaced people, including 400,000 Sudanese refugees in the east.
The conflict in Sudan started on the 15th of April, a bit more than 2 months ago, and we've already seen over 560,000 people crossing into neighboring countries. We've seen nearly 2 million people displaced internally in the country. The situation in Darfur is probably the one that is worrying us the most. Access into Darfur is limited, but we are hearing from those who are crossing into Chad a very difficult situation in Darfur. We're also seeing more and more of those who cross into Chad arriving with injuries.
As more refugees fleeing the violence in Sudan cross into Chad every day, 90% of them, women and children, many have no choice but to stay out in the open or under trees, while others are sleeping in makeshift shelters close to the border.
UNHCR is identified in sites far from here, at least ahead of 50 kilometers from here, to relocate people from the border so that the risk of insecurity at least is resolved, but also provide assistance to them.
The conflict in Sudan is affecting Chadian citizens as well, as those living near the border are no longer able to access healthcare and markets in Sudan. This has caused food and commodity prices to soar in areas already suffering from high levels of malnutrition.
For members of Sudan's Masalik tribe in Israel, they say they're watching in torment as family and friends have been caught up in factional bloodshed in the Darfur region. The ongoing fighting has inflamed long-running ethnic tensions, and El Geneina in West Darfur has seen some of the worst violence.
Just over 5,000 Sudanese people live in Israel, dating to when brutal conflict escalated in Darfur from 2003. At the time, Sudan's government and the Janjaweed were accused of widespread atrocities as they acted to crush an insurgency by rebels complaining of discrimination. The RSF was born out of these Janjaweed fighters, and now they and other Arab militias have again been accused of targeting African communities, going on the rampage in El Geneina.
From 2003, genocide, a lot of people, thousands of people, and the coming million of people becoming to IDP camps all around Sudan. And then also millions of people leaving the country and going to be refugees in different countries. And that is like going more worse and worse.
Many fleeing to neighboring Chad say they are forced to lie to avoid getting killed and pass through militia checkpoints.
I have children and relatives. They're all there. We lost contact with them since the events began. I hear no news and I don't know anything about them.
Last week, the United Nations raised the alarm over ethnically motivated targeting and killings of Mazalid, who comprise the largest single community in El Geneina, amid fears of a repeat of the atrocities.
Escalating violence and casualties in Darfur are deeply concerning, particularly the hundreds reported killed in the capital of West Darfur, El Geneina, in violence that appears to have an increasingly ethnic dimension. We're similarly alarmed at reports of sexual violence in both Khartoum and Darfur. These criminal acts must end now.
The community in Israel is collecting money to send to refugees in Chad so they can buy food, water, and medicine.
As we are a Sudanese community in Israel, or as Masalik people in Israel, we're trying to our best to help our people in Geneina. Example, now we are kind of collecting little money to send to Chad, and who's already in Chad able to buy food or water, medicine, whatever so they can do. So that's what we now preparing ourselves to help, even we are from far away. So that's what we're able to do.
Of the nearly 2 million people displaced in Sudan since the conflict started on April the 15th, over 280,000 have been displaced within West Darfur alone, according to the United Nations, and over 100,000 have fled into Chad.
When Foreign Dispatches returns, Japanese students are taking lessons not in the usual curriculum, but it's smiling. We'll have details in just a moment. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us on the program. Russian President Vladimir Putin has accused leaders of last weekend's Wagner mutiny of wanting to see Russia choked in bloody strife. The head of the mercenary group claimed Russia's war in Ukraine was based on lies, then threatened to march on Moscow before abruptly calling it off. A short-lived rebellion marked the biggest test of leadership since the February 2022 invasion of Ukraine.
Days after Wagner mercenaries called off their mutiny, Moscow residents on Monday were seemingly both unnerved and unfazed, going about their daily life. A tumultuous 2 days saw Yevgeny Prigozhin seize the southern Russian city of Rostov-on-Don and challenge the authority of President Vladimir Putin, following claims his forces were attacked by the Russian army. For a short while later, a deal was brokered that saw the mercenaries stand down, with Prigozhin to leave Russia for neighboring Belarus. The short-lived upheaval has raised questions about Putin's hold on power and, according to Ukraine's allies, exposed Putin's vulnerability since invading Ukraine.
The Russian government's lies have been exposed by one of President Putin's own henchmen. Now, the full story of this weekend's events and the long-term effects will take some time to become clear, and it is not helpful to speculate. Prigozhin's rebellion is an unprecedented challenge to President Putin's authority, and it is clear that cracks are emerging in the Russian support for the war.
We all saw the events in Russia over the last days. These are internal Russian matters, but what is clear is that President Putin's illegal war against Ukraine has deepened divisions and created new tensions in Russia. At the same time, we must not underestimate Russia. So it's even more important that we continue to provide Ukraine with our support.
I think that it's more important than ever to continue supporting Ukraine, because what has happened during this weekend shows that the war against Ukraine is cracking Russian power and affecting its political system. We are certainly following closely what's happening, but it's now the moment to continue supporting Ukraine more than ever. And that's what we will do. And the monster that Putin created with the Wagner, the monster is biting him now. The monster is acting against his creator. The political system is showing the fragilities, and the military power is cracking. So this is an important consequence of the war in Ukraine.
In his first public comments since the end of the short-lived rebellion inside his country, the Russian president condemned the armed mutiny by Wagner mercenaries. At the same time, he said he had deliberately let the 24-hour revolt go on as long as it did to avoid bloodshed, adding that it had reinforced national unity.
Speaking of Ukraine, residents living near what was the Kakhovka Dam continue to struggle amid flooding and electricity shortages. It comes as in other parts of the country, Ukraine and Russia continue to make conflicting claims about the success of Ukraine's counteroffensive.
It's been over a fortnight since a dam breach which caused massive flooding in southern Ukraine, and the scale of destruction is clearly visible in one village in the Mykolaiv region. The collapse of the dam on June the 6th unleashed floodwaters across southern Ukraine and Russian-occupied parts of the Kherson region, destroying homes and cutting off supplies. Locals here say that farmlands were completely flooded, with several thousand acres of barley, sunflower and other crops destroyed. There's no gas or running water in the village.
These are communities that lived right on the front line. Some of them have lived through the temporary military control of the Russian Federation. They've lived through daily shelling, daily missile fire, rockets, the noise of this war, and now they're having to live through the effects of this terrible, terrible flood. And it's a flood that's going to have a long-term impact on these communities. They've lost land, they've lost production, they've lost their fields, and they are going to have to suffer because of this ecological disaster for many years to come.
We are using boats and amphibious cars to support small communities here, communities with 30, 40 people that they have been really badly affected by the devastation caused by the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam. But this is not a new situation for them. They have been living through the horrors of the war for a while. Some communities told us today they don't have water at their house, they don't have food, they don't have electricity, they don't have gas. And that's why we are here, and we're going to be here for as long as necessary to support these people.
Authorities have fixed the power supply, but people are afraid to turn it on because their houses remain wet.
The
water was up to the ceiling. Everything here was underwater. The water pressed the window out. Our belongings and all of the furniture swam around. The walls are crumbling. Now everything is ruined and destroyed. It has become impossible to live here.
The nearby river's water levels have almost returned to normal, but locals say the damage has endured.
Look at what the flooding has caused. It seems like there was something else in the water. The crops look as if it got burned by some chemical. I don't know what else we're going to face, but now we'll have to clean up to get rid of it by destroying the dead crops.
More than 3,600 people have been evacuated from the flooded areas, while 31 people were still missing on Tuesday, and some 1,300 houses remained flooded. Ukraine accuses Russia of blowing up the Soviet-era Kakhovka Dam under Russian control since the early days of its invasion in 2022. The Kremlin says Kyiv sabotaged the huge hydroelectric dam to cut off a key source of water for Crimea and distract attention from a faltering counteroffensive against Russian forces.
Finally, we head over to Japan, where people are taking lessons to relearn how to smile after the COVID-19 pandemic spread across the globe. Citizens were advised to wear masks in order to protect themselves from the respiratory illness. Now the mask rules have eased, people in the country feel like they have forgotten how to smile.
Smiling lessons are now available for people in Japan following 3 years of government recommendations that people wear masks. This class is run by a company called Ega Oku, which literally means smile education. Students hold up mirrors to their faces while stretching the sides of their mouths upwards, fully immersed in a lesson, not in the usual curriculum.
When you are alone at home, it's normal not to be facially expressive. If this is the case, then not moving your face becomes the norm. I think there were a lot more such cases during the COVID pandemic.
Even before the pandemic, donning a mask in Japan was normal for many during hay fever season and around exams due to concern about getting ill for a key life event. Although the government lifted its recommendation to wear masks in March, many people have not let them go. Students of Smile Education can gauge just how perfect their smiles are with a special facial detection software that awards them a smile score out of 100.
It was a new experience for me to smile while paying attention to my facial expressions. I might become a bit more aware of what my facial expression looks like when I'm in a situation that makes me smile from now on.
The company has seen more than 4-fold jump in demand from last year, with customers ranging from companies seeking more approachable salespeople and local governments looking to improve their residents' well-being. An hour-long private lesson costs about $55 US.
And that's the program today. Remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Bye for now.